I'm just going to point out some interesting things about it. First off, you'll notice that it's got a fairly simple design. Yes, there are some color gradients on top, but you'll notice there's no images. And if you go to the new Cornell Johnson site, there's a lot of images, but you're not going to see any of that here. Yes, we did put a watermark in, so that kind of has a cool little graphic feature to it, but it's all got standard fonts. It loads very, very quickly. And you'll notice also that we use the simple form of the logo. Most universities have a branding guide, and they may have 4 or 5 different versions of the school logo. And Cornell is no different. There's lots and lots of different logo styles that all meet with the requirements of the Johnson School. We found the one that takes up the least amount of space, that loads the fastest, and this is the one we worked with because, again, we wanted the experience to be fast, quick, and to the point. So what I'm going to show you, I'm going to actually pull in an iPhone emulator. So this is actually the iPhone software running on my computer. So I can actually click and get the exact same experience that you would have if I had a real iPhone. And you can see that we're getting into the different parts of the site. And I would invite everybody to go and actually try it out. But when we talk about development, I particularly wanted to point out one thing. You'll notice that in the primary navigation we have this Maps feature, this map button for navigation. And we actually built a use case around this. When we did the interviews and we did the survey, we found out that a lot of people, especially prospective MBA students who want to come and visit the campus, have a tough time finding it. And Ithaca, New York's Ithaca is in upstate New York, and it's a pretty big little city, I guess you would say, in upstate New York, but it's pretty far away from New York City, and Syracuse is probably the largest or fairly mid-sized city to it. What's interesting about Ithaca, having done this many, many times, is the campus addresses themselves don't show up well on GPS. So you're in a rental car, you fly into the airport, you rent a GPS, your car with a GPS, and you try to put in the address, and you have a tough time finding things. And so we heard a lot of complaints about people saying, look, I just want to be able to find the campus. And so we decided that we were going to integrate the native map application. And so the first thing you'll notice when you click on that is, in this case, this opens Google Maps, which is the native application for most iPhones. And so the first thing that opens up is Sage Hall. Now I will say that this is because of what we're looking at here, it's not a real iPhone, so it doesn't know where I am. So the little blue button that says like Find Me, it doesn't work here. So I'm going to have to give you an example of how you would use this otherwise. But by clicking on Sage Hall, you have this ability to get directions to it. And since the phone doesn't know where I am, let me just tell it where I am. So let's say I'm in Syracuse. I just landed at the airport, and now I can get directions and show me that on a map. And so now I've got directions on my iPhone to get exactly to the address on campus. And as I'm driving, my little blue dot is going to follow me along. And most of the drive is pretty easy. It's when you get about 20 miles outside of Ithaca where it gets a little complicated. And then when you get on campus, it gets really complicated. And so this allows me, because of the GPS function, to be able to find exactly where I'm going in order to get right to Sage Hall so I can actually tour the campus. And so we did a similar thing with the recruiting events as well. I'm not going to go into it, but if we go back to the home page, attend an admissions event takes you off this page onto the Hobson's mobile site, where it's got all the Cornell admissions events for the whole country, and you can attend an admissions event and register right there. Again, the goal of this phone was of this project was for the prospective student. Excuse me. And we sort of built the use case around, I'm sitting in an airport, I just heard an ad on the radio, or I just saw an ad on TV, and I wanted to make sure that I'm going to pull out my iPhone and learn about Cornell. Okay, so let me get rid of this. So in terms of what's next, and I'm just in the final throes here, just a couple more minutes. One of the things that we're talking about now is swiping versus clicking. So instead of navigating by drilling into a site, think of it as a canvas that you move laterally through. In other words, you have a small box that you can slide in multiple directions over the canvas of information in order to get to where you're going. Clicking, you're drilling into something. This is especially relevant with the iPad, but it's certainly, you're going to see this more and more in the iPhone and type of environment. Another thing that's coming that's being worked on right now is functionality that appears and disappears as you interact with the site. And the best example we have for this is Kindle. Kindle's phenomenal in terms of when you're reading the book, everything that navigates goes away. But when you need to do something, it all of a sudden you touch the bottom of the screen and all these functionalities appear. And so that's something that you're going to see more and more. Layering in applications is another one. There's certainly no reason why you should not develop apps for your university or for your school and layer them in so that if it makes sense for the user to actually get that app, they can quickly get it. Walking tours of campus is a great example of that. And finally, flexibility. And the best thing I can say about this is 12 months ago, nobody knew what Twitter was. A very, very, very small group did. 6 months ago, very, very few people knew what Foursquare is. And now they are absolutely enormous. And everybody's thinking about how to integrate them into their websites, how to use these social networks, because it's more than just Facebook when it comes to social networking. What's next? I don't know the answer to that, but you need to be flexible so that when it comes up, you're prepared to integrate it. So some key takeaways. First off, mobile is an extension of your brand. It absolutely is. Its success is a reflection on how you're perceived by potential students, parents, faculty, and staff, and the community. So you want to make sure that you do it right. Don't do a bad job. And if you can't do it in-house, hire a firm. Certainly, it's not as expensive as building a website, but it's not inexpensive either. And keep that in mind. You know, it's rumored that Blackboard charges $30,000 per year for their mobile site builder. Certainly, firms can do it for less. In the long term, iFactory can absolutely do that for less money. And so there's a lot of things to realize that it's not cheap, but it's also not super expensive. Excuse me. Consider a primary site for the admissions and a sub-site for current students. Just like you might build your primary website to attract new students, it's something that you may want to consider doing as well. And then as a tab, you can then take them to an underlying site, a sub-site for existing students, because that's what you're probably doing now in terms of student portals. Finally, usability and functionality are the most important things. So avoid putting things on the site just because people think they should be there. Obviously, no flash, no images. Think about quick loading, limit your text. I like to say think about Twitter, just sort of get to the point. Okay, so that's pretty much it. I'm done. I'm a little over. I apologize for being 3 minutes late. So thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has. My contact information is here as well. That will stay up on the screen, and we will make this deck available for you to download in the next few days. So I have a question here from Martha Fitzgerald. So should one's mobile site visually relate to one's website or look more like a smartphone? And I would say, Martha, that the answer to that is that you want to have your mobile site really not look necessarily like your main website. Absolutely, you have a color palette that you should use. You have logos and things along those lines, but it should have its own look. You don't want to simply make it look like a smaller version of your website. I have another comment here that the Cornell site does not look good on an Android. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but certainly we did try to test it as much as we could. I think those are the only two questions I have. That's not really a question, it's more of a comment. Am I missing something? Okay, so if anyone has any more questions, please feel free to please type them in. And if not, thank you so much for your kind 30 minutes of listening to me, and I'd be happy to talk with you one-on-one at any time. Also, look for future webcast events. We've got some really interesting stuff coming up. So I have another question that just came in terms of both looking about the CMS for mobile sites. I would suggest that in terms of the CMS for the mobile site, that you really only look at powering those areas that are going to be really, really frequently updated, and especially things like calendars and event schedules and things like that. Oftentimes you can feed in something that's coming off your main site, feed it into a template that's on the mobile site, and that is powered by the CMS. What you don't want to be thinking about is powering a simple screen that's got 4 or 5 sentences that might explain a program or something like that by the CMS, because I think at that point what you're doing is you're just taking on added complexity. There's no reason why you can't do it, but the goal is ultimately to make sure that you're doing it in a way that maximizes your dollars. And so that, I think, is how I would address the CMS part. Another question that came in is the main smartphones we designed for. Well, it really depends. We like to start off with looking at the iPhone. I think that that's the most sophisticated browser that's out there right now on a mobile device. Certainly, Android is another good example. There is a levels of, like iPhone, there's levels of Android, and Android 2.3 is the most recent. It's called Gingerbread. So, you know, you should be thinking about those. BlackBerry is a reality. Everybody who deals with BlackBerry hates it. I'm not talking about the user. I'm talking to people that design for it. Things just don't display well. And as long as, you know, frankly, most of us who have BlackBerries, myself included, certainly understand that it's something that, you know, I'm fully prepared not to get a good visual experience on my BlackBerry browser. And so if I see kind of a lousy experience, I really don't care because I'm prepared for that. So designing for BlackBerry is not necessarily something that you need to be worried about all the time. Next question we have, build an app versus a mobile-friendly site. It's a fantastic question. And it's a complicated answer. If you build an app, you're locked into who you're building an app for. And building apps are expensive. And believe it or not, you could be looking at $30,000 or $40,000 just to build an iPhone app. And if you're going to build an iPhone app, you better build an Android app. And then you might even want to consider building a BlackBerry app. So now you're looking at a huge, huge amount of money. So a mobile-friendly site should run on all of these platforms. It may not run as well as your website runs on different types of computers, but it should be functional and usable on different stuff. But that doesn't mean that there aren't things that you could build an app around. And one of the things that we've been exploring with some people is the idea about building a campus tour into an app. Most of these phones have a GPS-enabled chip, so they know exactly where you are. And if you activate that, you could be looking at a map that allows you to tour the campus, and it knows when you're standing in front of a building, and it can give you information about that building. It can give you information about a classroom or about a discipline or something else, and then you can have flexibility with it. If you're a major university, you may have a walking tour for students who are interested in science versus a different walking tour for students who are interested in engineering. Takes them to different buildings, takes them through different professors, gives you lots of different options. And so apps like that are things that I think you can only do in an app versus getting information across is much more something that you might do just in a mobile site. So it looks like we have still have a bunch of folks here. So again, please go ahead and ask any questions that you want. We've still got a few minutes left before we're out of time, so I'd love to help out wherever I could.